going to be doing startups. Welcome back. Let's begin. So, first, we have developing an idea. A founder's first goal should be to create a product that helps solve a conflict for customers. Therefore, founders should ask the following questions when coming up with their idea. Who is the product for? Why is this product needed? What problem would this product solve? Is that problem important enough? And is there an actual need for this product? The following quote is from Steve Blank, a famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur. More startups fail from a lack of customers than from a fail of product development, meaning that there should be a market for your startup business before you actually go ahead with developing the product. So, finding a co founder. Most successful startups have a co founder and a founder that work together. However, most failures in startups are caused by conflicts between the two founders themselves. Therefore, it is important to be truthful about your strengths and weaknesses in order to help find a co founder that accurately complements your skills. Some of the following are tips for hiring a co founder or employees in general. Do not give everyone a high title. Also, do not follow major companies' recruiting techniques as your company is only a startup. Hire those who have faith in your company and have trial periods for potential employees before bringing them on board full time. Next, understanding equity and compensation models. So, first, do not leave anything out of the discussion when it comes to equity distributions amongst co founders. Unequal split of equity or profit can actually lead to distrust, and therefore, giving an even share to each of the company's co founders will help the company come first. You should aim to have the equity discussion early on so that lawyers and shareholders will not need to be involved once the company grows. Next, debunking some common myths. Renting an office is actually unnecessary when starting off. Instead, work in a garage, library, coffee shop, or spare bedroom. Furthermore, if a formal work setting is required, one can visit AWS lofts to be in the proximity of many technical experts that can help. Furthermore, keep an eye on monthly expenses such as rent and payroll. Measure the rate at which profit grows, and measure the cost of acquiring new customers. Furthermore, follow set timetables in order to keep on pace with all your goals. Next, customer discovery. So you have to validate your idea initially by discussing your product with people that you know, such as friends, family, and potential customers. Customer discovery, or finding your customer market, is evaluating, correcting, and refining your idea. This helps to This requires a repetitive cycle to create. First, you must build, learn, test, then evaluate. The more customer feedback you get, the more of an advantage you have. Finally, customer discovery helps you give customers what they actually crave. So the following video, which will be linked below, as always, is a video discussing equity and compensation models for startups. Next, how to find and listen to customers. So interviews with customers are ultimately the best way to receive feedback. This will help you figure out what matters to them. Every idea starts with finding a new way to please customers, and the goal is to constantly update and to keep up with the customer's needs. To do this, determine whether your service will be used by consumers or other businesses. The following are some tips for when communicating with your customers. First, stay away from any vague inquiries, but also stay away from yes or no questions. Instead, inquire fundamental questions designed to invite insight from your customer. Next, general open-ended questions are typically more beneficial. And lastly, end your conversations by asking your customer who else that you can talk to. Customer validation and understanding your market. Customer validation is both finding and comprehending your customer's market. Enthusiasm does not necessarily mean that you actually will have a large market. Therefore, to determine how large your market is, ask yourself the following questions. Is it large enough to support your business? How many people will actually buy your product? Is it a new or already existing market? See the click-through rate. And lastly, create a sign-up page for your product's launch. Consider how much money it will take to reach your markets as well. Software-only products cost way less than hardware-only costs. Follow- Following this, also consider your implementation roadblocks. The following include certain rules for the specific industry that the startup might be in. Lastly, know your competition and learn from their mistakes to help set you apart. Building a prototype. So, a prototype is something that is created in order to see whether or not a product will actually succeed after launch. Focus on learning about your product rather than coding and adding to it when building your prototype. Furthermore, a prototype must be added in order to make the product best suited for a customer's needs. Do not hurry the process of making a product's prototype. Also, check frequently to make sure the prototype follows your goal. Next, introducing the concept of a minimal viable product or MVP. So, a minimum viable product is typically the first product that the company makes. This is thought of as the simplest edition of the product that the company will make while it still proves the hypothesis that the company went into the business with. This has as little features as possible and is only tasked with creating the key function that the business intends. An MVP is the first product to be ready for the consumer market. An MVP also tests the hypothesis and is the bare bones structure of what the whole idea that the startup was based on was meant to be. Just like a prototype, an MVP won't be ideal, and instead it will prioritize functionality over aesthetics. How to develop an MVP. So, building an MVP has multiple repetitive cycles, and going through processes such as designing, building, deploying, and measuring is needed. With each addition of new processes, the MVP becomes steadily better, and this allows for quick and responsive feedback from users. It is often advised to keep the MVP simple. A quote from Reid Hoffman, an internet entrepreneur, says that if you aren't embarrassed by the first version of your product, you ship too late. This is basically saying that you should simply keep the MVP as minimalistic as possible while still proving the hypothesis. Later, you can add any additional features after the hypothesis has been verified. This video will discuss what an MVP is. As always, they will be linked below. Next, sprints. So sprints is a process that is often used when designing and developing software, and this is when a certain amount of time where predetermined work is actually completed. Sprints usually have a fixed theme and objective, as well as a deliverable function, and they should typically last 1 to 2 weeks. The shorter, the better in terms of sprint length, as your goals during the sprint will not change. And then, after the sprint is completed, save customer feedback for the next one. The prioritization during sprints should be primary business functions only, and should focus on high effect and quick work. A quote from Nikki Stone, a senior software developer at AWS, was that you have the capacity to build one great product, make sure it's the right one. The recommendations after sprints are continuous implementation and continuous delivery. What are some potential pitfalls? So, an anti-pattern is a universal response to a conflict which is unproductive. Being prepared for an anti-pattern will help prevent any disasters when they undoubtedly show up. Technical debt gathers when engineers rush through work instead of focusing on quality and proper implementation. Technical debt does not necessarily come from laziness, but rather a strategic decision to swiftly eradicate a conflict. Not generalizing code can lead to extra coding work and refactoring. Therefore, it leads to undifferentiated heavy lifting. Customers want the product and do not mind you borrowing from any existing resources as well. So, what are the fundamentals of working with AWS? There are two types of decisions: one-door decisions and two-door decisions. These do not happen equally. Two-door decisions are the most common and occur the majority of the time. This is because two-door decisions provide a way back and let the people in the field solve the problem quickly as there is usually a way that they can undo and remake the decision. However, one-way door decisions are final and there is no way back. Therefore, it requires deeper thought. Security decisions are examples of one-door decisions and cannot be remade. Therefore, when making your security decisions, one should consider both their and AWS's responsibilities. You should also consider who gets access to certain objects among the workforce and how much access the users receive. Startups on AWS receive enterprise level security and they offer SSL and DDoS protection. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and this is standard security technology that is for creating a protected link between a web server and a browser. DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service, and this is a cyber attack that interferes with the services of the host. Therefore, startups must know the relation of their product with the government, healthcare, and more, and follow any rules and regulations of the field. Next, points of integration must also be considered, as developers will not be able to understand a product without its proper documentation. An API is an application programming interface, and this provides a set of guidelines to connect with another person's software. And it is important to select the correct database for the type of data you need to store. Next, introduction to data architecture with AWS. So, a monolithic architecture is an architecture that combines all the working parts of an application, such as data input, output, processing, air handling, and more, all together into one singular program. And this allows for the rapid development of products as you do not need to make the processes ahead of time. A well designed monolith can be scaled horizontally and then broken apart at a later date. Architecture applications such as Amazon Elastic Beanstalk will automate all the processes for you and provide a much simpler way to work and handle. Microservices are independent services that each perform their own functions. Microservices work together as a single product. However, if one microservice goes down, the others are unaffected. Therefore, microservices are good for scaling large systems but take longer to build. Optimize data architecture for speed as well. Serverless is a type of architecture where the servers that code is running on do not need to be set up by the user and therefore grant more time for the user to focus on the code itself. This automatically is scaled for the user to avoid the user from having to predict their own customer traffic. Next, assessing your legal needs. A common legal decision that a business makes is whether or not it should become a legal entity. A legal entity is when a company gains legal rights and obligations such as tax filings. There are multiple types of legal entities such as limited liability. Limited liability is the detachment of personal resources from business resources, and this prevents business owners' responsibility in losses and legal liability. These exist to help business owners take risks without fear of any legal action or liability against them. However, it is not perfect and it does not serve as a get out of jail free card. Next, what are unincorporated entities? So these are businesses that do not have limited liability. There are two types, sole proprietorship and general partnerships. Sole proprietorship is owned by businesses and managed by one person, when a general partnership has numerous owners and split responsibilities amongst them. There's no legal difference between the owner and the business itself. Sole proprietorship is cheaper to start but comes with less overhead and also risks the owner's personal resources. So here's a crash course in data architecture, which will also be linked below. Continuing on with legal discussions, finding a lawyer is an option for businesses that are legal entities, and they have the option to converse with large startup law firms. These types of firms do not make business owners pay up front, but they take a percentage of the company in return. If businesses do not want to work with large law firms, they can work with startup-friendly firms such as Atrium. Atrium is a corporate law firm that uses machine learning software to automate their legal processes. Another option, if neither of the above are preferred, is to find counsel in a colleague or a friend. friend's recommendation. Next, NDAs, IP, and other legal considerations. So, an NDA stands for a non disclosure agreement. An NDA is an agreement that prevents unauthorized disclosure of secrets. If one is assigning development work to an outside organization, then that outside organization should sign an NDA. A venture capitalist provides startups with funds but receives a return investment, and a venture capitalist provides organization that will most likely not sign an NDA. A founder's agreement is a necessary legal step when there are multiple founders involved. It can outline responsibilities of each founder. No template needs to be used as a reference. It could be hard to publicate. Oftentimes, there are numerous negotiations, and it can be very time consuming to finish. However, there is also an intellectual property. This is a type of legal concept that provides legal protection for assets. The trademark is a type of IP protection which shields the product of a company from being copied. Patents guard an organization's product and gives the patent owner the right to prevent others from using, creating, or selling the product. Patents usually last several years. And lastly, copyright guards original artistic work, and for most startups, copyright is the primary IP protection. Next, fundraising. Fundraising is a full-time job and should be taken seriously. Venture capital firms invest in companies they believe in and hope they will receive a large return from this investment. There are different types of investments, such as pre-seed and Series A and B. Pre-seed or seed investments are an investment that occurs early on, even before the company shows that the product will work, whereas Series A and B is funding that has helped to continue to scale the business after it has already been proven. The pressure to deliver when a VC invests can be high, and it is likely that a business, even with this support, will be out of business in only a few years. Therefore, some VCs also work in pre-seed or seed funding, which typically occurs in the early stages of product development. These investments range from $50,000 to $250,000, and then seed investments range from $250,000 to $1 million. In nearly a year to 18 months, a seed VC may want you to fundraise twice the amount given, and when fundraising to VC, it adds another person to answer to. Funding sources outside of a VC. There are many other ways to get money outside of VCs. These include angel investors, which are wealthy people that look to passively fund startups with capital in exchange for equity or convertible debt. They don't want a large return on investment, but instead have different motivation. For some angel investors, a 3 to 5 times return on their investment would be wonderful. Next, non-dilutive funding. Non-dilutive funding is the money that is incorporated in order to support the product without giving any equity. Examples include bank loans, university, or federal grants. Crowdfunding is another type, and this includes funding such as Kickstarter and GoFundMe, and this may assist in providing early adopters, however, may be more difficult than getting seed rounds. Accelerator programs are group-based programs where entrepreneurs produce their ideas into reality, and they select a tiny percentage of companies and help make those companies grow. Usually, investments are approximately $20,000 to $150,000, and they ask for a 5 to 7% equity return investment. Accelerator programs offer mentoring, training, and feedback, and they usually last about 3 months. Crafting a fundraising narrative. So, a fundraising narrative shows why one is spending money in the first place. It is not the same as a pitch deck, as it is much less thorough. Although this is true, the primary questions must still be asked. The narrative should be short and sweet as well. It should have the ability to inform the potential investors and should be quick so that it can be explained in 20 seconds or less. The breakdown of each 10 seconds is provided. Find the one persuasive reason as to why your company should receive investment, and a good narrative should have a strong financial plan to support its claim. Financial models are basically inferences. So this is a video about fundraising, which will also be linked. Lastly, what makes a good pitch deck? Your pitch deck is basically your business card, and it is given to those in the best position to help you, such as investors and mentors. One of the first things customers will see and will have a huge impression about your company is your pitch deck. So, some key areas include problems and solutions, the business model, and the market. So, when creating a deck, you should start with whatever is most persuasive and keep it incisive. It's better to be concise than to make investors disinterested. Typically, this deck is only 10 to 13 slides long. And in your deck, make sure you answer why the startup is a good opportunity for investors, why is this the proper team to do it, and why is this funding needed. Next, how to prospect your initial fundraising funnel. Generate contention amongst investors. The 3-to-1 rule is important in order to generate competition. Be in the final stages of negotiation with 3 investors, and it is estimated to need about 10 meetings between investors in order to create a 3-to-1 situation. Some investor companies invest in numerous companies, while others only invest in a limited amount. Tools like Crunchbase and LinkedIn can help find investors if you cannot find 20 or more to start with. Other entrepreneurs have VC companies that work with them, making it easy to get advice on how to approach. Focus on people in the VC business rather than just firms themselves. Next, initiating fundraising mode. So spend approximately 10% of time creating relationships with potential investors and founders later on in the process. Relationships can make it easy and quick to find high-level investments. Negotiate and finalize with an investor before moving on and searching for a new group. Understanding the different types of people working at a VC firm is also important. These include partners, venture partners, principals, and associates. Partners are generally the people that make the most decisions. Venture partners are part time workers and look to source deals while making a couple investments. Principals are new to the business and are just starting to make deals, while associates cannot make investments but can help business owners navigate through the process. Attempts to have a mutual acquaintance that introduces you to the investor. Understanding the stages of growth. There are multiple stages of company growth, all with different goals. Stage 1 is focused on delivering a product with an objective of obtaining a large amount of sales. Stage 2 is focused on expansion. At this point, survival is guaranteed, and now the startup is a more mature business. Therefore, to get to stage 2, you must do your homework in order to have a chance to eventually grow. How to build a product roadmap. A guide through the whole business process from making a product to making your first sale. This roadmap creates milestones throughout the map in order to help shareholders know where key important events are in a basic timeline. A and B testing helps set apart two options when coming across a certain variable must function. A/B tests bring about valuable results about which option will perform the best on a particular parameter or goal. This helps make decisions less biased. An important decision when making a roadmap is deciding when to pivot. If your product development team starts heading in the wrong direction, a pivot to your roadmap can help get things back on track. If something is not working, do not force it and cause more trouble. For example, Instagram pivoted their idea from a check-in product to a place to post personal pictures to share with the world. Then they stripped off any non-essential features in order to save money and better the app. Therefore, think about your fit and how effective the product is at having customers find it publicly. Common startup growing pains. Startups can cause long hours and be extremely demanding. There are ways to conduct businesses with greater results for your employees and your own product as well. Create and enforce strict limits on work hours. Throwing all energy into a startup will actually hurt your product and its effectiveness. Therefore, you should generate nourishment codes for all employees. Also, pay a great amount of attention to the hiring process. Employing people that fit your company culture is the ultimate goal. Interviewing is also critical, and it is important to consider if a candidate will contribute and not just be a non-negative. A good interview question to ask would be how the candidate worked through a real-life problem. At a startup with less than 100 employees, the CEO themselves should make all the hiring decisions. Culture. Culture is the persona of your company. It is a mixture of all of those following categories. Therefore, think about having third party voices giving a voice into the culture of your company. Create a culture that can accommodate not just yours, but the community's strengths and weaknesses. Culture is more difficult to generate than perks, and it is not the same thing. Find different ways to talk to employees en masse, and information is received differently by different people, mentally speaking. Therefore, multiple pass throughs will have to be used in order to spread all the necessary information. A founder should personally interview at least 50 of the first hires and develop effective interview questions. Defining culture is not the end. Thank you. We will have all the videos linked below in the description, and we hope to see you next time.